Now it is time to unpack the ceteris paribus in the law of demand. But before that, we need to be very clear about two concepts. We have made repeated references to two terms till now, demand and to quantity demanded. See them on the graph. One is represented by D and the other by QD. And it is important to realize that there is a difference between a change in demand and a change in quantity demanded. Demand refers to a schedule of planned rates of purchase, the demand schedule, and depends on a great many ceteris paribus conditions such as incomes, expectations, prices of other goods, etc. It is represented by the demand curve. Whenever there is a change in a ceteris paribus condition, there will be a change in demand, a shift in the entire demand curve to the right or to the left. So D changes only when ceteris paribus is broken. Quantity demanded or QD is a specific quantity at a specific price represented by a single point on a demand curve. When price changes, quantity demanded changes according to the law of demand, and there will be a movement from one point to another along the same demand curve. Look at the graph of petrol again. At a price of $3, this many gallons of petrol per year are demanded. If the price falls to $1, the quantity demanded increases, right? This movement occurs because the current market price for the product changed. You can see the arrow pointing down the given demand curve D. So QD changes when price changes. In fact, it also changes when D changes. But don't get confused. Graph moving is a D change. Only the point moving is a QD change. And D changes will also have a QD change normally. Superset subset. Simple. Like this. When you think of demand, think of the entire curve. When you think of quantity demanded, think of a single point on the demand curve. Let me emphasize this again. A change or shift in demand is a movement of the entire curve. The only thing that can cause the entire curve to move is a change in a determinant other than the good's own price. A change in any of the ceteris paribus conditions for demand leads to a change in demand. This causes a shift of the curve. A change in the good's own price leads to a change in quantity demanded for any given demand curve, other things held constant. This is a movement along the curve. How do you use a graph to demonstrate the two following scenarios? 1. A student buys more pizzas because the price of pizzas has fallen. And 2. He buys more pizzas because he just got a 20% raise in his pocket money, giving him additional income. 1. The movement from A to B is called an increase in quantity demanded. 2. The movement from A to C is an increase in demand. Okay, now let's apply this to a policy issue to see a real-world application, a case study. We all know smoking can lead to serious health issues like lung cancer, etc., right? And public policy makers often want to reduce the amount that people smoke. There are two ways that they can attempt to achieve this goal. One way to reduce smoking is to change D, to shift the demand curve for cigarettes and other tobacco products. Public service announcements, mandatory health warnings on cigarette packages, and the prohibition of cigarette advertising or even display on television and movies are all policies aimed at reducing the quantity of cigarettes demanded at any given price. If successful, these policies shift the demand curve for cigarettes to the left, as we can see in this graph. Alternatively, policymakers can try to raise the price of cigarettes. If the government taxes the cigarettes more, for example, it will cause higher prices. A higher price can encourage smokers to reduce the number of cigarettes they smoke. In this case, the reduced amount of smoking does not represent a shift in the demand curve. Instead, it represents a movement along the same demand curve to a point with a higher price and lower quantity, a change in QD. That is theory. But in reality, how much does the amount of smoking respond to changes in the price of cigarettes? Economists have tried to answer this question by studying what happens when tax on cigarettes changes. They found that a 10% increase in price causes a 4% reduction in the quantity demanded. Not much, right? This is because cigarettes are addictive and people continue to smoke even if prices go up. Discouraging data? Yes. But the interesting and positive thing is that teenagers are especially sensitive to the price of cigarettes. A 10% increase in the price causes a 12% drop in teenage smoking. They're not fully addicted yet, so they change behavior faster. Also for them, perhaps budget constraints are higher. But why exactly does this goods demand behave in this manner? We don't have all the detective tools yet to answer this question fully right now. So remember this mystery. We'll come back to it later and solve it once we acquire a few more tools. Now it is time to unpack the ceteris paribus. What are these other things? Let's now change these other variables and see how demand changes, shall we? So what are the ceteris paribus areas? These were things that were kept constant in our analysis till now so that we can allow only the price to change. Let's see this list of ceteris paribus demand shifters. 1. Income changes. 2. Taste. 3. Expectations. 4. Number of buyers. 5. Price of related goods. As we can see, all of these are non-price factors or non-own price factors. If something happens to alter the quantity demanded at every given price, the demand curve shifts. Let's imagine that in a market, the demand for ice creams had come down after people became more unhealthy and diabetic. But then, suppose the American Medical Association discovered that people who regularly eat ice cream live longer, healthier lives and actually helps reduce their diabetic issues. This game-changing discovery would raise the demand for ice creams, right? At any given price, buyers would now want to purchase a larger quantity of ice cream, and the demand curve for ice cream would shift outwards. Let us illustrate these shifts in demand. Any change that increases the quantity demanded at every price, such as an imaginary miracle discovery by the American Medical Association, shifts the demand curve to the right, that is outwards, and is called an increase in demand. Any change that reduces the quantity demanded at every price shifts the demand curve to the left and is called a decrease in demand. Let us list out the demand shifters one more time. So, if any of these changes, demand changes.
Sir, a doubt. What do we call these shifts? Is it your left or my left? Up or down? It's a bit confusing.
Let's just keep it simple. Understand the logic behind it. If demand is increasing, QD also increases, and QD increases in this direction, that is to the right. So when demand increases, it is to the right. Just remember that. And to avoid even the left-right confusion, I like to use outwards and inwards. But the text of left and right will also be displayed so that you can get familiar with the terminology. Okay? Let's now take up the demand shifters one by one. 1. Income. Let's say Crusoe's income increases. Automatically his budget line increases. Assumption alert here. We assume that if income increases, Crusoe allocates all that increase to his budget, or that his budget is equal to his total income. So if income increases, what has happened? See here. At each price point, he is willing and able to buy more. So the demand curve shifts and QD increases. Take market demand now. If income in an area generally increases, demand for restaurant meals, for instance, can go up. That is, market demand shifts outward, and hence more fancy restaurants can come up in an area to cater to that demand. 2. Taste. When Crusoe was a kid, he used to love ice creams. But as he grew up, taste changed. What happened to demand for ice cream? It came down. And if the health announcement comes after that, will it shift again? Yes, as we can see in the graph. Or take another case. Crusoe is told by his friends to lose weight. So he starts having healthier food. So what happens to his demand for pizza? It shifts inwards, right? Such new information can change buyers' taste. Positive information can increase demand, while negative information has the opposite effect. So for instance, the recent information and advertising about the benefits of vitamin D have greatly increased the sales of vitamin D supplements. This is how advertising works. Advertising generally increases product demand because it disseminates positive information about the product. Public campaigns can also significantly influence demand. For instance, the public campaign against cigarette smoking caused a steep leftward shift in the demand curve for cigarettes. Increasing cigarette taxes increases cigarette prices, shifting demand along the demand curve as we saw earlier. Government of India also attempted something similar with the Rose Cow Ande campaign that helped shift demand outwards for eggs in the country. Same types of campaigns have been tried for other desirable goods like milk and also for family planning, public transport, etc. 3. Expectations of price and of availability. What would happen if Crusoe expected petrol price to rise tomorrow? Wouldn't he try and fill his tank today itself? Maybe even store some and keep? If expected price rise was a lot, we might soon see a lot of people queuing up to store petrol today, right? Let's take another case. Crusoe broke his phone one day and was planning to get an iPhone. But his techie friend told him that the latest iPhone is being released next month, and so the price of the older model will come down a lot. What do you think Crusoe did? He waited one full month and used his broken phone till then. What happened to demand for iPhones? It came down due to the expectation of future price drop. If most of the market has the same information, we can expect the market demand to drop. Now think, but would this apply so much to ice creams? The effect would in fact be less. Why? Because perishables you can't really stock up as much, right? So demand shifts less in the case of perishables. Crusoe might eat a bit more ice creams before the price increases, but that might be it. But we do tend to eat more as per expectations. For instance, I hog like crazy during orange season and mango season because I know availability and price will be against me in the non-season. So based on expectations, my demand would go up when the season is on. The same I used to do for watermelons, but with the new breed of watermelons that are available around the year, I'm never concerned about price or availability expectations anymore. So the spikes in my demand doesn't happen anymore. In fact, my demand has come down actually, since I know whenever I want, it will be available. So I don't over purchase just because it is a season for watermelons like I do during the orange season. So expectations clearly alter our behaviors a lot. Try to think of at least one instance where expectations altered your behavior. 4. Number of buyers in the market. Market demand is just a summation of individual demands. So obviously, if the number of individual demands to be added increases, what will happen? For some reason, if there is a lot of newly eligible consumers in the market, they will naturally buy more products at the same price, shifting the demand curve to the right. Something like this happened in the lead up to the 2008 crisis in the USA when standards for giving mortgage loans were lowered in 2005. Suddenly, people who hadn't been eligible for a home loan could get one easily. More people bought homes and the demand curve shifted outwards. Long story short, eventually the mortgage market crashed because the new eligible customers were not really eligible and couldn't repay the loans, and this led to the greatest financial crisis in the last half century. The number of buyers may increase for a number of reasons. It could be because of population growth or even because technology has allowed suppliers to sell to a much larger market. For instance, the internet has greatly expanded the marketplace for many goods, allowing even a small company to sell to the entire world. The demand for health services is greatly increasing and is anticipated to continue to increase because of the much larger number of people who are living longer than ever. It can also be because more customers have income enough to start purchasing things. For instance, as more people in China and India are able to afford cars, there will be a greater demand for cars in the market. Let's do a small thought experiment now. If we increase or decrease the minimum driving age, that is the minimum age to get a driver's license, what will happen to the demand of cars? Demand for a good may shift when the prices of other related goods change as well. There are two types of related goods: substitute goods, which are goods that can be used in place of other goods, and complementary goods, which are goods that can be used together. Let's take some examples. Let's take Pepsi and Coke. Are these related goods? Are they used together or in place of each other? Clearly, they can substitute each other. Crusoe would be okay to have either Pepsi or Coke. In such cases, consumers respond to a price increase by buying less of that commodity. Instead, they satisfy their desires, perhaps imperfectly so, by substituting it with something else, relatively cheaper. As an example, suppose the price of Coke rises, while that of Pepsi stays unchanged. Assume Crusoe chose Coke at the original prices. At the new prices, the preference for Coke is to some extent outweighed by its increased cost. So the consumer may settle for drinking less Coke and more Pepsi. That is, he may substitute Pepsi for Coke. If the preference for Coke is not very strong, or if the price rise is very large, the consumer may switch completely to Pepsi. Can you describe the change you would expect to see in the demand curve for Pepsi if the relative price for Coke increased significantly? Same for the market also. More people might make this shift as a result of the price change. Now, Coke and Pepsi are not fully substitutable. What if Crusoe was a Coke fan? Then he might be less willing to buy Pepsi and it might take a large price difference before he shifts, right? But commodities like wheat, sugar, etc. are what are called perfect substitutes. Two items that are perfectly indistinguishable in the eyes of the consumer so that even a minor price change causes a complete shift. Take an example of your mom buying your daily vegetables from vendor A versus vendor B in a vegetable market in your city. Would it make a difference from whom you bought? What will happen if one guy is charging more for the same quality vegetables? Branded items versus the generics or unbranded versions are also often close to perfectly substitutable. They accomplish the exact same function. So if the price skyrockets for the brand name item, most people will just buy the unbranded stuff instead, thus increasing demand. So if the price of Crusoe's branded jeans goes up too high, he would substitute to unbranded jeans. Try to think of more examples of substitutes. Umbrellas and raincoats, peanut butter and Nutella. Come on, think of a few more. One point to note is that greater than 10, the consumer 1 demands 0 units of the good, and similarly at any price greater than 15, consumer 2 demands 0 units of the good. The market demand can be derived by adding these two equations together. At any price less than or equal to 10, the market demand is given by 25 minus 2p. For any price greater than 10 and less than or equal to 15, the market demand is 15 minus p. And at any price greater than 15, the market demand is 0. Pretty simple, right? For a real world illustration of the law of demand, let's look at petrol again. Consider how petrol consumption varies according to prices consumers pay at the pump. Because of high taxes, as we have seen, petrol and diesel are more than twice as expensive in most European countries than in the United States. According to the law of demand, this should lead Europeans to buy less petrol than Americans, right? And they do. As you can see from the figure, per person, Europeans consume less than half as much fuel as Americans, mainly because they drive smaller cars with better mileage. What was the incentive to buy these smaller, more efficient cars? More expensive fuel, right? In the CBA, the C had been pushed high, and the consumers reacted appropriately by trying to reduce demand for petrol.